Oh, good morning, good day, good week, good Fridays. We head into a good weekend, I hope. We're 1 week away from the Super Bowl and 1 week and a smidge, so Chiefs Eagles. I'm going to say go somebody. I won't do that. I hope go good game. That's my hope and expectation and standard for the upcoming Super Bowl. Hope you're doing well. Dan Miller, Historical Solutions, LLC. It's Friday. Guys, what are we looking at? January 31st. Wow. Fast month, a lot going on. Looking forward to the rest of the new year of 2025. Listen up. Oh, welcome. 250 podcast on the river with Dr. Dan. We're top fiving. We're top fiving today once again. So we're basing it on my entry from yesterday that I posted in Americanism Redux, the top five from this week, 250 years ago, on the 250 River with Dr. Dan. Before we begin, let's thank this week's sponsor. Listen up, you entrepreneurs. Listen up. John Kruger in New York City is offering to sell everything you need to make a copper mill, to operate a copper mill, to gain wealth from a copper mill. That can be converted to an iron mill even. So we can go two ways on this, copper mill or copper mill to iron mill. He's got it all, the materials, the furnaces, the knowledge, the handbooks, everything else. He doesn't have the workforce, but he's got everything else you need to prop up a brand new copper mill that he's gotten imported from overseas. So see John Kruger in New York City. All you need to do is go to New York City, ask for John Kruger, and you'll be directed to where this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for wealth for all you entrepreneurs out there can purchase from our good man John Kruger, this week's sponsor. 99% fact, 1% fiction. Still waiting on the money from him to make it that final percent fact. Hope you're doing well. So let's get into our top five. Wonderful graphics. Number five. We're looking at John Hunter. Ship Captain John Hunter has just arrived in the port town of Norfolk, colony of Virginia. Been there for a couple of days. He's a ship captain. He's used to kind of having the command of things, right, on board ship. Well, for a change, he's got the command of things standing on the docks there at Norfolk because he's just pulled in from London, and everybody in town wants to know, hey, what's the latest on the colonial British problem? What's the latest news about all of this? Where are we headed, Captain Hunter? And so he holds court. He holds court on the docks and shares two things. And remember, he says, hey, folks, I was 7 weeks ago. 7 weeks ago, I left London, and now I'm here 7 weeks later. So, 7 weeks ago, the general sense was Parliament they'll figure it out. They'll settle this thing. They'll dial it back, as we've said in previous episodes. They'll dial it back. They're going to settle this thing. Parliament will. But, Captain says, they may not. So a lot depends. The rest of it depends on what the new Congress, the new Special General Congress, will do when it meets again in the spring in Philadelphia. So we got two things from our good Captain John Hunter on the docks at Norfolk. 7 weeks ago, everybody in Parliament, or everybody thought Parliament can handle it. When I left London 7 weeks ago, everybody thought, well, a lot's going to hang on what happens in the Congress that's meeting upcoming in the spring in a couple of months. That's from our good Captain John Hunter. As I said, he's used to being that way on board ship. He gets to feel that way now with everybody looking at him, everybody hanging on his words here on the docks at Norfolk. That's number five. Number four. Flashy design. Number four. We're looking at, we're looking at a new weekly publication that's been started in London, and we're on our second edition. And it's called The Crisis. And the whole thing it's devoted to, between edition 1 and now to edition 2, and however many editions we have in the future, all it's devoted to is explaining a British defense of American colonial rights. That's all it does. In that spirit, in this week's edition of The Crisis, that's a magazine now. In this week's edition, they They have a verbal or a written description of Lord North, the British Prime Minister, who is kind of the guy seen as the author, the leader of the coercive acts that are punishing Boston and Massachusetts right now. The description of him in The Crisis, essay number 2, edition number 2, is essentially, he's Satan, he's the devil, he's evil. His parents were from hell. He was raised in hell. He's bringing forth the ideas and the actions of hell. That's our depiction of the British Prime Minister by a London publication. So, if you see some wild stuff in 2025 on media, it ain't got nothing on The Crisis and its depiction of the British Prime Minister 250 years ago this week. Takes us up to number 3. Number 3 on the top 5. Charles Saunders. Never heard of him, right? That's okay. He's an admiral in the British Navy. He's also a member of the Admiralty, a kind of a Joint Chiefs of Staff for the British Navy. A little bit, right? A loose analogy, right? So Charles Saunders and his colleagues on the British Admiralty have issued an order this week, 250 years ago. And the order is for 6 sloops from the British Navy to load up full of military personnel, Marines, Dragoons, they're called, and infantry. 6 ships of them, and head out. Start across the Atlantic as soon as possible. Your destination is Boston. Your new commander will be General Thomas Gage, who's the British Imperial Governor at Boston or in Massachusetts right now for the coercive acts. 6 sloops of armed personnel. We're putting muscle behind the policy. That is number 3. Oh, I'm damaging my graphic design. Number 2. Top 5. Number 2. I don't have a name, but I have a moniker. A New Jersey farmer, quote, a New Jersey farmer, close quote, has just written an essay. He's published it in one of the New York newspapers. And in that essay, he calls for our own association, one and all. If you believe we've gone too far, if you believe the wrong people are pushing protest, if you believe that everything really belongs to the British Empire and that's our better way of living, our better way of going, join together. And let's call ourselves the association. They've got theirs. That economic boycott, they've termed it the association. The Congress did that, right? So, but let's have our own, man. Let's have our own loyalist association. Who wants to join with me? That's what he writes in his essay that gets printed in a New York newspaper this week, 250 years ago. A New Jersey farmer. We need our own association. Who's with me? That's number 2. And number 1. Top 5, 250 years ago this week on the river with Dr. Dan. 2 friends. They're separated. Now hang on. They're separated by the Atlantic Ocean. One's on the west side in the American colonies. One's on the east side in England, in Scotland specifically. One is a woman named Mercy. One is a man named James. Let's start with Mercy. Mercy needs news. She doesn't have any news about what's going on. Now, she's pro-rebel, she's pro-protest, she's pro-colonial rights from her head to her toes, believes it, loves it, lives it. She needs news. What's going on? In the absence of news, she writes a letter to a dear, trusted, and respected friend, John Adams. And in the letter, she's asking for his advice. I don't have any news. I'm asking you for advice, John. Is it all right for me to stand up in public, whether as a writer or as a speaker, to stand up in public and basically ridicule someone who I think is hurting our country with his ideas? Is that okay for me to do that? Is it okay for a Christian to do that? Is it okay for a woman to do that? John, I like your advice. So friend turns to friend. That's on the west side of the Atlantic. East side of the Atlantic, same thing's happening. James Boswell, he's a writer. He's writing a book. He's traveling with the guy about which the book will be written, or about whom the book will be written. That's Samuel Johnson. Boswell asks Johnson while they're traveling, you know, I realize I don't know very much about this whole British colonial dispute. He's saying this 250 years ago. I don't really know that much. And guys, I respect you. I revere you. I admire everything you've done intellectually in your life. I trust your judgment. So, Dr. Johnson, can you do me a favor? Can you kind of list out some of the things I ought to go read to get me up to speed, to get me the insights that I need into what's happening within the British Empire, between Parliament on one side and the colonies on the other? Can you give me some guidance on what to read and what to learn from? Thanks, I appreciate you doing that. Asks his friend. Friend asks a friend for advice. A friend asks a friend for advice. That's number one on the top 5, 250 years ago today. I'll leave you with a thought, a question. Do you have a friend like that? You have a friend that you can turn to and say, hey, respect, admire, revere, trust. Need your advice. Yeah, it can be about personal stuff, but I need your advice about some of the public stuff as well. So that's where we are. Dan Miller on the 250 River. You've just done the top 5 for 250 years ago this week as we wrap up January of 1775 in January of 2025. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great weekend. Go Bills, go. Go Bills. Oh my God. Well, they lost and they deserved to lose. They weren't cheated. They deserved to lose. Go Bills. Go Eagles. Go Chiefs. Go good game. Have a great weekend.